I love the design. I'm sure you've had, I have to acknowledge that they are a little bit phallic looking. And so I'm curious because, in the fire service, we make jokes about hoses and things like that. So um, I was just, yeah, I
We have
just wanted
seen
to.
it in action, actually. That literally, when I showed them to one set of firefighters, one of them held them to his crotch to have the other guy grab them, like, "Oh, try this out." I mean, not surprisingly, we have seen that. Yes, obviously, they have a bit of a
Yeah.
phallic nature to them.
So do you use both hands, right? When you use them, you put both of your palms on the copper piping,
As
correct?
any good person should. You want to use
Okay.
both hands, yeah.
Okay.
More
I
effect
was,
from both hands, right?
sorry, we have to go there. And then I would guess copper has natural antimicrobial properties. Is that correct? That kind of helps with, when you've got a bunch of people in rehab and we're all kind of passing it down the line. So that's nice. And I know that you guys are also kind of evolving the design. Can you tell us a little bit more about like how the new ones might look and what you're kind of adding or taking away from them?
Yeah, I mean, one thing we can get into the nitty gritty if we want. The copper on there is a really neat technology called heat pipes, which I'm happy to talk about.
Hmm.
But the new design, you know, we've heard this term firefighter proof, which
Hmm.
means nothing is firefighter proof. But we build these right now by hand.
Hmm.
They're not built to take the level of abuse that is possible on the fire ground. We haven't had any field breaks of them yet, but we know that, if you're tossing these around or they're getting dropped, there is the possibility of them breaking. The new ones are set up to be in that much more firefighter proof mold with a really robust handle that should be nearly impossible to break or shatter. And the base has a protective sleeve, so it won't be easily dented. And it can really take that sort of rough style of abuse that is likely to happen on the fire ground.
Hmm.
In
Yeah.
terms of like what we've taken away, nothing in terms of functionality. So they function exactly the same way as the current version,
Hmm.
but we have reduced the weight a little bit. So currently they weigh about 3.5 pounds each when they're filled,
Hmm.
and we're removing about 0.5 pound from that. Lighter is always better especially if you're trying to carry this around in a pack and things like that.
Hmm.
Why don't I grab it? Our mock-up. It'll take me 1 second. So
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
grab it. Bring it out. Let's do it. Um, and I guess what are Evie, while he's grabbing that, what are what are some of the quirkiest uses that people have suggested to you as you kind of take this around and really, share its efficacy? I'm sure people are like, oh, I could use this for XYZ. What are some of the silliest things that you've heard?
I mean, silly, that's a good question. I mean, I think some of the silliest things is we have some people who will pull them out when they are mowing their lawn and it's hot outside and they just want something to sort of like take the edge off, which is awesome. That's a great way to cool yourself down. Definitely probably needed on some days in some parts of the country.
Hmm.
Um, I think one of the more interesting, I wouldn't call it quirky, but interesting ideas has been suggested to us is in the realm of mental health.
Hmm.
So there is a lot of information out there. We have not read a lot of studies on this topic, but there's a lot of people will use hold ice when they're having an anxiety attack or a panic attack, or they're talking about something very difficult in a therapy session. And there is an effect of kind of grounding that they describe. And we've had some of our customers tell us unprompted that they have used our device in that way. And so that's something that's really interesting to explore. We've also had a lot of women ask us if these could be used in the treatment of hot flashes to provide some relief. And there's some we've seen some anecdotal evidence that they are able to provide relief in that use case as well. It's honestly kind of really cool to see how many different use cases there are for cooling. And I'm sure we'll continue to hear of more.
Did I see on Insta you had a friend who was pregnant who used them for her contractions while she was in labor?
Oh yeah, I did forget about that. I guess that is quirky. So same thing. This is my neighbor. She had heard that when she was going to deliver her baby, they would potentially give her ice to hang on to. And so she was like, could I use your device? So we sent her with a kit so that she had the Narwhals when she was in labor, and she used them and had a very positive experience. This is an N of 1, but still great to hear nonetheless. And she said that it really gave her something to focus on, which really helped her. Again, it's like sort of that grounding use case, if you will. Also, I'm sure you're very hot when you're in that situation. And so you're probably also getting a cooling effect, which is providing relief.
All right, Ariel, what did you bring us to check out? Oh, the newest version. So
So
cool.
this is a 3D printed mock-up, but
Okay.
basically gives a good feel for what it'll look like. So it's got this
Yeah.
kind of rubberized exterior, and it's got a very robust handle that's kind of all one piece and just made to be really much more solid, much more ability to take the abuse that is likely to happen, and just really meant to be looking like something that is purpose-built, not made and modified off the shelf parts like we do these days in my basement. So.
Hey, you got to start somewhere, I say. And I'm really amazed that, you're having so much success with the original hand-built prototype. So yes, kudos to you on that. Thank you for giving us a little sneak peek of what they are going to look like. Did I see you also custom engraved? Was I imagining you engraved the bottom too as well?
We
Yeah.
engrave right now. So we make a lot of this on a laser cutter. So we engrave our logo, and then we have custom engraved. I think the ones that have our Narwhal logo are downstairs right now. But a lot of fire departments love to have their logo engraved on them, so we do that as well. And we've just found that, I think there's that in the same way sports teams kind of have that pride in their sports team. Departments obviously have pride in their logo. So that's been something that we've often done, is customize them and personalize them either for people or departments or sports teams.
Also, you don't want certain shifts swiping your good stuff. So it's nice if you know whose it is. That way it can return to its owner. Because I know shifts compete, and you definitely don't want it disappearing on a fire scene and somebody absconding with it. So let's talk about the name. Why Narwhal? Like, have you seen a narwhal in the wild ever? That's my first question for you.
I have not.
I have not either. This was we were trying to think. My very original name for them was the Spire, because it's sort of a rock climbing. Needed something that had that spire or tower or something non-phallic naming. But we then thought, well, if we're going to have different products, maybe some naming theme that was cool animals, and Arctic animal that stays cool and has a tusk, right? So it just seemed to all fit.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah, that's one of my dreams. See a narwhal. That's on the bucket list for sure. I guess let's see what else. I am curious if you've ever thought about, then a further evolution into something that would even be smaller and maybe able to be carried inside bunker gear. Have you played with this idea of, even making it maybe a wearable or something of that nature? I mean, it would have to go in the hands or the feet or the cheeks, but I was just curious if you've kind of dabbled in that idea.
We haven't thought deeply about how to actually put it in the bunker gear, like you're saying, to actually be used while in the fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is not inconceivable, but that is certainly a tricky engineering problem, in that you need a certain amount of to have things work well, you need a certain amount of weight, just because what keeps these cool is the fact that they have this cool pack, right? So if you're dumping thermal energy, you need somewhere to dump that thermal energy into. So you wouldn't be able to make them much smaller from that perspective. There are some other ways you can perform cooling. They're not very efficient, but if you had enough power, you could do it. I'm sure that there's real problems with putting something powered on bunker gear, because a battery,
Yeah.
if it catches fire, is like a horrible, horrible safety hazard. So it's really an interesting question. That is not something we've not yet gone down the road of, just because I think the engineering side of that, it's doable, but that is a big lift engineering task. So we'd have to think very, very deeply. Probably the feet would be the most likely candidate actually for that, just because you're already wearing relatively big boots and you could maybe sneak something in there to help people cool off. I think with your hands, it would be a little tricky because you don't want anything thermally conductive in those gloves. You're
True.
trying to seal out the heat. So,
True.
yeah, sorry, you're making me start to think about like,
Nerd
how would I
out,
do
yeah.
this? And I just think it'd be, yeah, the boots would probably be the more likely place to put something.
Yeah, I just remember back to my days at Antarctica, and we had the hot packs for our hands and our feet that we were constantly using, you know, for the opposite problem of being too cold all the time. So I was just curious if, yeah, you had considered the cooling technology, but that would be interesting. And because I really think, you know, being able to combine that, like restore a little bit of that cooling capacity inside bunker gear would be an interesting, just, you know, mental thought experiment, if nothing else. So, but yeah, it's really incredible. And I am so excited. I'd love to dive a little bit more into performance, like really how this helps with performance. What is, in a nutshell, kind of the science behind cooling yourself down?
Yeah. So there are really two things that are happening when you're palm cooling. And one, we've been circling around it this entire time. When you're cooling your palms, you cool your blood. Your blood runs through your circulatory system. And so, you know, it is a very effective way to reduce your core body temperature, which is then going to accelerate your heart rate recovery. So for athletic performance endeavors where you are pushing yourself, interval training, for example, is a good one, or a sports endeavor like basketball players running up and down the field, taking a break, being able to recover heart rate faster is one of the mechanisms that's at play. The other thing that's happening that's more applicable to resistance training is that you have this cool blood running through your system again. It's running to your muscles that are working hard. And our muscles are incredibly inefficient, I have learned. And I believe, Ariel, correct me if I'm wrong, but they are 20% efficient.
About 20-25% efficient. Yeah. So you're dumping about 4 times more energy into heat than you are into actual mechanical motion every time you move your
Wow.
muscles.
So
Wow.
if you have you can get these infrared cameras and watch somebody do a squat and just watch their glute light up after one rep, right? Like it's incredible. And so you again, you can't feel that temperature because you have no internal mechanism for sensing that, but you are generating a lot of heat, and our muscles, our fascia, our skin, our fat, it's all good insulators, so that heat stays in those muscles that are working. You are offloading it, but slowly. And that heat actually inhibits an enzyme involved in ATP production. And that's actually a safety mechanism, because if we didn't slow down the production of ATP, we would be able to just keep going, and we would be generating all this heat that would eventually cook our muscles from the inside. So it's a safety mechanism. One of the reasons why you fail is that slowing down of energy production at the muscle cellular level. So when you're cooling your palms, you cool that blood, runs through those muscles that are working hard, and it offloads that heat a little bit faster than you can do alone. And so what that means is that you can come back to your next set and you can perform you can maintain a higher reps in reserve, or higher energy output, higher quality reps for longer. And really the magic of palm cooling for its use in strength training and gaining strength faster is in that ability to add extra volume. So where normally you do, 3 to 5 sets, you can really push that to 6 to 10 and maintain that high quality, maintain a high level of output, and week over week get stronger. And the effects It really, some of the studies were done on pull-ups, some were done on bench press, some were done on sub-max strength. So using about 70% of your 1 rep max. Some were done using, true 1 rep max strength. And based on those parameters, you're going to see different results. But that body weight study on pull-ups, 144% increase in volume over 6 weeks. With the 1 rep max bench kind of pyramid program, participants that were palm cooling were seeing 22% increase in their 1 rep max strength in, again, 6 weeks. And what's interesting is that is on par with, potentially better than, the effect you're getting from creatine. Just to put that in perspective, one of the most well-studied supplements, very effective. So our point is, like, do both, right? Give yourself every advantage you can. But yeah, in a nutshell, palm cooling is really enabling you to add a little bit of extra volume, a little bit of higher quality volume over time, and then just see those faster strength gains.
And like, if you're doing interval work, you're just recovering faster. If you're doing some sprint intervals or something like that, just recovering better between intervals.
Wow. Are there any contraindications? Like, can you cool too much? Is it possible to kind of overdo it?
The only contraindication we would say is, so in a sense, for the cooling, no, your body, because you will vasoconstrict. If you get too cold, you'll just vasoconstrict and you don't really dump any more heat. Your body's just like, well, we'll insulate ourselves now. So you don't really ever, palm cooling only really brings you back to baseline. It doesn't really put you below baseline.
Okay.
But if there is a danger, the danger is because you can push further and do more sets. So when I first started doing this, I was 44 and I was just like, well, let me just do pull-ups for an hour, cooling 3 minutes between. And you're doing, like 15 or 16 sets of pull-ups. And at some point you start to go, maybe I shouldn't do this much work on my tendons, and I don't want to get an overuse injury. So I think that's the one. There's a temptation to sort of, because you get that benefit from adding that extra volume, there's a temptation to push that extra volume a little too far. That's the one thing. But like anything else, listen to your body. If your body's telling you, you're making my elbows or my tendons a little, aggravated, don't do it. But adding that little extra volume, an extra set or two, you can get a lot of really nice magic happening.
Wow, that's, not having to use supplements, I think, is a huge plus to this, and the fact that it's working with your body is just such a neat symbiosis of, like, if you get I love that. Our bodies are quite smart in that way. Is there anything else we haven't covered that you really want to share with us today of why this is so important and why we should really, or any tips for firefighters other than, that they can really up their cooling game and really be more mindful about, hydrating and things like that? Anything that we need to know as firefighters you can share?
I would put 2 in there.
Okay.
One is, sweat is your friend, right? So, and part of what helps you sweat is having the right electrolyte balance. The way your body pulls water from your blood into your sweat glands is having electrolytes. So you not only need to be hydrating, you need to have that replenishing those electrolytes, because that's helping you sweat, it's helping you cool. And so the very first thing is, the moment you can, the moment it's safe, get exposing as much of your skin as is publicly acceptable, right? So taking your bunker gear off and really just getting, if it may be opening your pants and getting airflow in there. And if you can get into an air-conditioned environment, if you can get a breeze, you could be in the shade, anything you can do to help that sweat evaporate, that's huge, right? It's a huge cooling power advantage. And the other one that's really interesting that we've learned is cooling your neck is fraught with danger, if you will.
Oh, tell us the danger.
The reason is that cooling your neck feels good. And where that's tricky is, there is good evidence that you can actually boost performance from neck cooling. So if you're a combat sport athlete, you cool your neck between bouts, that actually can help you push harder. The danger of that is it is not actually dumping much heat. It is sending a perceptual signal that says, oh, you're better, you're cooling down, you're okay. So if you're starting to get into that danger zone, like you're at a campaign fire, you just did one bout, you came out and you just cool your neck and you're like, I think I'm good. You may actually have quite an elevated core body temperature, not realize it, and then really push yourself in that danger zone. So you're much better off doing something like cooling your palms and really removing heat and not just getting a perceptual signal. So no one's going to argue that cooling your neck feels good. And it does feel good. And the problem with that is it can fool you into thinking you are cooler than you are.
That is really good to know. Thank you for sharing that with us. Evy, did you have anything else you wanted to add to any last thoughts before we kind of leave our viewers with one resource?
Sure. I mean, I will end with the notion that heat is nasty. We, we are very humans intolerant to heat. And I was very surprised to learn that at a core body temperature of 6 degrees Fahrenheit, warmer than normal, we are dead. And so I don't think people take heat as serious as as they should. And these these heat illness symptoms are all the signals telling us, hey, you're hot, go cool down. You're not in the danger zone yet. That true danger zone, like go rest, go recover, get this heat out of you so that you can go back and work. And, there are plenty of evidence that removing heat in these moments can actually increase your work capacity, enable you to push harder, longer. That's really the core of what, you're being able to do. So, treat heat as the threat that it is.
It's easy to forget, especially in firefighting. We just take for granted it's just a hot job. It is a hot, salty job. And I love that you've shown us today that there are actually ways to mitigate that, and we don't have to just tolerate being flushed faced and nauseous and all this stuff. So thank you both for what you're doing and contributing to our population. And so to kind of wrap things up, I always like to leave our viewers with one tool or resource that they can kind of learn more or explore more into this subject. So what would you like to leave us with today?
Yeah, I would really encourage everybody to check out the blog we have at apexcoolabs.com. We've summarized a lot of scientific studies, including some that were done on firefighters using forearm cooling, and tried to make them really accessible, very easy to read, very quick to read. And so there's some great resources there, as well as some protocols you can use in training to increase your bench or add to your deadlift or whatever, crazy performance goal you have right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you both for joining us today. It was a really fun conversation and hopefully very eye-opening for everyone that's still watching. And as always, thank you to our community members. If you've made it this far, good job. I'm sure you've walked away with a lot of value today. And if you have any feedback for us, feel free to write me at info@firepowerx.com, and we'll put all of the resources mentioned in today's episode below in the show notes. So check that out. And we will see you all next time. Thanks for watching.